Trust me when I say this. You are the only one he wants. Not because his options are limited, not because loneliness has made him desperate, not because you simply happened to be nearby when he needed someone. None of those smaller, more convenient explanations apply here. What is happening between the two of you is rooted in something far less accidental and far more profound than circumstance. He wants you because something inside him, something ancient and intuitive and operating beneath the level of his rational mind, recognizes something inside you. And that kind of recognition, the bone-deep, soul-level kind, does not happen often in a lifetime. Most people move through their entire lives and never experience it at all. The fact that you are standing in the middle of it right now is not something to second guess. It is something to understand. To truly grasp what is happening, you need to understand something about the masculine psyche that most people never take the time to explore. A man can desire many women. Desire for him is relatively uncomplicated. It rises quickly. It follows beauty and novelty and energy. It does not ask deep questions before it arrives. A man can also be entertained by many women. He can enjoy their company, appreciate their humor, feel good in their presence, without any of it touching him at a level that truly matters. He can even be emotionally distracted by many women. He can find himself thinking about someone, drawn to her for a season, feeling something that resembles connection, without it ever reaching the deeper chambers of who he is. But authentic love? That is an entirely different territory. Authentic love only activates when something deeper is touched. When a woman manages, sometimes without even trying, sometimes without even knowing, to awaken the hidden layers of his unconscious mind. That is a rare event. And it has happened with you. What you have with him is not surface attraction. Surface attraction is pleasant, but it is also disposable. It fades with familiarity, shifts with mood, and dissolves the moment a newer or shinier distraction appears. What you have triggered in him is not that. You have reached something underneath the surface, something he does not allow most people anywhere near. You have triggered his depths. And that word matters. Depths. Not the shallow water where he is comfortable and in control. The deep water. The part of him that moves slowly, that holds weight, that does not stir easily, and does not settle quickly once it has been moved. There is a part of him that the world never sees. The world sees his confidence, the composed and capable exterior he has learned to present because it works, because it earns respect, because it keeps him safe. The world sees his ambition, the drive and determination that he wears like a second skin. The world sees his logic, his ability to analyze and decide and move forward without appearing to waver. The world sees his controlled exterior, the steady surface of a man who seems to have it together. But underneath all of that, underneath the performance of strength that most men are taught to maintain from the time they are very young, there is a quieter layer, a softer territory. The feeling side of him, the intuitive side, the part that carries old wounds from moments in his past when vulnerability was met with disappointment or ridicule or abandonment. The part that holds unprocessed memories, old fears that never fully resolved, questions about his own worth that he has never spoken aloud to anyone. Most women only ever meet his mask. They interact with the polished, curated version of him, the one that is charming and capable
and emotionally available only up to the point where real depth would be required. They get the presentation. They never get the man. But you reached the man behind it. You got past the mask, not necessarily through anything dramatic or deliberate, but through something in your nature, your energy, the way you see and respond to people. You arrived in his life and somehow, almost involuntarily, he let you past the door he keeps closed. That is why this connection feels different, for both of you, but especially for him, even if he lacks the language to explain why. He cannot fully articulate what makes this feel unlike his other experiences. He only knows that it does. He only knows that something shifted when you entered the picture, that something in him responded to you in a way that unsettled him, in the best and most frightening possible sense. When a man encounters a woman who reflects his inner feminine energy, the emotional, intuitive, soul-based dimension of himself that he has been quietly carrying and carefully suppressing, something extraordinarily powerful happens beneath the surface of his awareness. He feels seen in a way he has almost never been seen before, possibly never been seen at all. He feels understood without having had to explain himself, which, for a man who has spent most of his life carefully managing what he reveals, is an almost overwhelming experience. It is beautiful to him in a way he cannot quite name. And it is terrifying for exactly the same reason. Because now, in your presence, he cannot hide. The armor that has served him so well in every other context stops working when you are near. And a man who has relied on that armor for a long time does not know quite what to do when it falls away. You mirror back to him the parts of himself he buried long ago. The sensitive parts, the uncertain parts, the parts that needed things he never let himself ask for. You hold up a reflection that shows him more of himself than he usually allows himself to see, and that is not a casual or forgettable experience. That is not something that happens with someone who is simply attractive, simply interesting, simply available. That is psychological recognition. And recognition, when it happens at that level, creates attachment, real attachment. The kind that does not release its grip simply because time passes, or because he tries to logic his way out of it. You may have noticed something that confuses you, something that seems like a contradiction. Even when he pulls away, and he may pull away because closeness of this kind is genuinely scary for a man who is not used to it, he does not fully detach. There is always something that keeps pulling him back. Even when he goes silent, even when he creates distance or becomes difficult to read, your energy lingers in his mind in a way he cannot simply decide to stop. He might try to distract himself. He might throw himself into work, into routine, into the company of other people. But you are still there, quietly persistent in his thoughts, impossible to fully push out. This is not obsession in any unhealthy sense of that word. It is something more meaningful. It is integration trying to happen. It is his psyche working, beneath his conscious control, towards something it recognizes as necessary for his growth. Authentic love does not always arrive the way we imagine it will. We expect it to be loud, to announce itself clearly, to come with grand gestures and unambiguous confessions. But authentic love is often much quieter in its arrival, much more subtle in its early movements. Sometimes it arrives as restlessness, an inability to feel fully settled that he cannot trace back to any obvious cause. Sometimes it arrives as overthinking, as a man who does not usually dwell on emotional matters, finding himself turning over every interaction with you, analyzing what was said and what was meant and what might happen next. Sometimes it arrives as emotional confusion, as a feeling of being pulled in multiple directions at once without understanding why. And sometimes it arrives as a fear, quiet but persistent, of losing something he cannot fully define, something that feels precious in a way that does not quite make logical sense to him yet. Because you are not just a woman in his life. You represent something larger to him, even if he has not framed it in those terms. You represent growth. And growth, as necessary and ultimately rewarding as it is, threatens the ego. The ego is the part of us that wants to stay comfortable, stay in control, stay in the territory where we already know how to navigate. When a man feels authentic love beginning to take hold, his ego starts to shake. The version of himself that is accustomed to emotional detachment, to keeping things light and manageable, to maintaining the kind of control that keeps vulnerability at a safe distance, that version of himself begins to dissolve. And the deeper self, the one that genuinely longs for union and intimacy and real emotional safety, begins to surface. That emergence is uncomfortable, even painful. It asks something of him that he has not been asked to give before, or has not allowed himself to give. So if you have seen him become distant at times, uncertain at times, even reactive in ways that seemed disproportionate, it is not because he does not feel. It is almost certainly because he feels more than he knows how to hold.
Distance, for a man experiencing this kind of love, is often not rejection. It is a retreat to gather himself, to process what is happening inside him, to try to find his footing in terrain that is unfamiliar and where his usual tools do not quite work. Authentic love forces a man to confront what psychologists call his shadow, the collection of parts of himself he has denied, suppressed, or refused to look at directly. The shadow holds his insecurities, the quiet, persistent voice that asks whether he is truly enough, whether he will ultimately fail the person who matters to him, whether his weakness will eventually be exposed and found to be disqualifying. It holds the fear of losing control, which for many men is one of the deepest fears of all, because control has felt like survival for much of their lives. You activate those questions in him. You bring them to the surface not because you are demanding or difficult, but simply because you matter to him. Because when something truly matters, everything it touches becomes charged with greater significance. The truth that sits underneath all of this is simple, even if everything surrounding it is complex. A man only fears losing what he truly values. If he were indifferent to you, if this were casual or convenient or disposable to him, there would be no internal struggle. He would not overanalyze your words or replay your conversations in his mind in the quiet hours. He would not measure his actions around you, would not notice his own mood shifting in response to your presence or absence. But he does all of these things, even if he does them privately, even if he would not easily admit to them. He does them because you are not just another experience moving through his life. You feel like something else to him entirely. You feel, even if he has not yet found words for this, like destiny. Not in a fantastical sense, but in the deeper sense of something that was always meant to find him. There is another dimension to authentic love that is easy to miss. The way it begins to quietly reorganize a man's imagination of his own future. He starts to see you there, not in a deliberate, constructed way, not as conscious planning, but as a natural and unbidden presence in the mental images he has of what his life might look like going forward. He sees you in the spaces of his future,
that he does not mentally populate with people he is only casually connected to. This happens before he has made any decision, before he has said anything. It happens automatically, which is precisely what makes it meaningful. You cannot will yourself to see someone in your future. You can only notice that they are already there. When a man truly loves, he begins to integrate a woman into his sense of self in a way that makes her happiness directly relevant to his own state of being. Her approval begins to matter to him in a way that goes beyond ego. Her absence creates a subtle but real emptiness that he carries with him through his day. Her joy becomes something he wants to be responsible for, not as a burden, but as a quiet purpose. These shifts in him are happening, even if they are invisible from the outside, even if he has not yet found a way to express or acknowledge them. And here is perhaps the deepest truth of all. Authentic love is ultimately not about longing, not even primarily. It is about transformation. If you have noticed in him a pull toward becoming better, more honest, more emotionally available, more willing to sit with discomfort rather than running from it, that is one of the most powerful indicators that what he feels is real. Surface attraction feeds the ego. It makes a man feel good about himself without asking anything of him. But authentic love challenges the ego. It asks him to grow, to become more than he currently is, to open territory inside himself that has been closed for a long time. That is why what you share with him can feel so intensely charged, so weighted with significance. It is not simply romance. It is psychological evolution. It is two people meeting each other at a level where genuine change becomes possible. You may sometimes doubt what you feel because he does not always express it perfectly or even adequately. Men are, for the most part, not taught to articulate emotional depth. From very early in their lives, they receive messages, explicit and implicit, from family and culture and peers, that emotion is something to manage rather than something to express, something to contain rather than something to share. So the deep feeling that lives inside him
does not necessarily have an easy path to the surface. It does not always find words. It does not always know how to make itself clear in the ways you might most need it to. This is why you have to learn to watch behavior more carefully than you watch words. Does he return, even when he has created distance? Does he protect you in the ways that are available to him? Does he soften when he speaks to you in subtle but real ways that are different from how he engages with the rest of the world? Does he react with particular strength when he senses distance from you, when he fears that something between you might be shifting away from him? These behavioral patterns are the true language of what he feels. They are more honest than anything he might say in a moment of performance or deflection. Here's a truth worth holding closely. A man can entertain many women, can move through many connections that feel, from the outside, like they might matter. But he only feels psychologically claimed, truly, deeply claimed, by one. The one who manages to reach his unconscious, who activates his inner world, who feels familiar to him in a way that defies logical explanation, because the recognition is happening at a level that logic does not govern. You are that woman for him. That is the reason comparisons do not work for him. Other women might be beautiful, might be interesting, might offer things that seem on paper to compete with what you offer. But none of them reach where you reach. None of them touch what you touch. The bond does not erase with distance,
or dissolve with time because it was not formed at the surface level where those forces operate. Authentic love, at its core, is not about possession. It is about recognition, the experience of encountering another person and knowing, beneath all of the noise and confusion and fear, that something true has been found. He recognizes you, not your appearance, not your achievements, not the curated version of yourself you might present to the world. He recognizes something in you that corresponds to something in him that he has rarely, if ever, felt recognized in before. That recognition lives in him even when he is quiet. It persists even when he is confused. It continues to do its quiet work even when he is deep in the middle of processing his own shadow, working through the fear and resistance that authentic love inevitably stirs in a person who has kept themselves guarded for a long time. If you feel the depth of this, if something in you knows that what is between you is real and significant and worth holding, trust that knowing. Not blindly, not in a way that excuses poor behavior or refuses to acknowledge real problems, but intuitively, with the kind of trust that belongs to the part of you that perceives things before you have words for them. Because when two psyches meet at this level, when the conscious and unconscious begin to move toward each other, it creates something genuinely rare in this world. Something that most people only glimpse from the outside and wonder about. This is not ordinary attraction dressed up in romantic language. This is the real thing, the kind that reshapes a person, that asks something genuine of both of them, that carries within it the possibility of real and lasting transformation. He feels authentic love for you. Whether he is ready to fully step into that, to embody it without fear, to let it lead him somewhere new, that is a question his own growth will answer in its own time. But his inner world has already made its decision. It made that decision the moment something in him recognized something in you. And once that kind of recognition is awakened, once that door has been opened, it does not close again. It does not forget what it found. It does not stop knowing what it knows. He knows. Even in the silence, he knows.